In the depths of every man lies a wellspring of vital force, untamed, raw and potent. This force is not merely biological. It is archetypal. It is the primordial fire that moves through the roots of our being, the same energy that has animated warriors, sages, and creators since the dawn of time. Wait. Yet in the modern world, this sacred reservoir is hemorrhaged, squandered through compulsive desire, fragmented attention, and disconnection from meaning. Semen retention, when approached not as repression but as reverence, becomes a radical act of reclamation, a return to the throne of one's inner kingdom. To understand the significance of this practice, one must first grasp what is being lost. Semen is not just fluid. It is the physical crystallization of life force. It contains the blueprint of creation, capable of producing another human being. The energy required to produce and expel this essence is immense, both physiologically and psychologically. When released aimlessly over and over, it drains not just the body but the psyche. The result is a man who feels scattered, unstable, unsure of himself, adrift in a sea of desire, yet never truly satisfied. Retention, then, is not about suppression. It is the act of honoring what is powerful within and choosing not to waste it. It is the recognition that not every impulse deserves an outlet, and that true mastery arises not from indulgence, but from direction. When a man retains, he begins to feel the pressure of unspent energy building within him, not as anxiety, but as potential. This energy seeks expression, and without the usual release, it rises, searching for higher ground. What once flowed outward now turns inward, kindling the inner fire of transformation. The first days or weeks of retention often bring chaos. The unconscious throws its tantrums, dreams intensify, restlessness emerges. Repressed emotions rise to the surface. This is not failure, it is initiation. What we are witnessing is the shadow, the denied aspects of self coming into the light. Most men flee at this point, returning to release for momentary relief, but those who remain, who endure the storm, begin to feel something shift. The body grows stronger, the gaze deepens, the voice steadies. Become clear, precise, unshaken by the winds of triviality. This is the beginning of energetic sovereignty. The man no longer leaks his essence into the void, but cultivates it like a sacred fire. With time, the energy becomes a source of vision. It fuels not just physical strength, but insight, creativity, and spiritual depth. It moves into the heart and awakens a desire not just for pleasure, but for purpose. It rises into the mind and sharpens discernment. What was once fog becomes focus. This is the same energy that mystics spoke of as kundalini, the serpent power coiled at the base of the spine. Left dormant, it causes restlessness and addiction. Awakened and guided, becomes illumination. Our culture has inverted the sacred, turning what is most potent into something profane. Sexual energy is marketed, sold, and drained through endless stimulation, leaving men hollow and confused. But in every age, there have been those who remembered. Those who chose the path not of excess, but of inner alchemy. They didn't become less human, they became more. Semen retention is not merely an old practice, it is a remembering of what it means to possess soul. When a man holds his seed, he begins to hold himself. His energy no longer scattered in 1,000 directions, but gathered, condensed, and directed like a beam of light. He becomes magnetic, not because of charm, but because of depth. Others sense something in him that cannot be faked. Presence. This is the beginning of true power. Not dominance over others, but dominion over self. It is not loud. It does not shout. It simply is. In a world saturated with noise, distraction, and endless temptation, the will of a man becomes diluted, diffused like light through a dirty window. The modern man is torn in countless directions, driven by compulsions he does not understand, desires he does not own, and goals he never consciously chose. He acts, but he does not know why. He moves, but without direction. He is free yet shackled, liberated from external constraints, but enslaved to his own scattered energy. It is here that the practice of semen retention begins to reveal its deeper value, not as a tool of discipline alone, but as a path toward inner clarity. When a man retains, he interrupts the cycle of compulsive gratification that numbs the voice of his inner self. He steps away from the constant barrage of stimuli and begins to hear something subtler, the whisper of his own will. Not the will that arises from ego or social conditioning, but the authentic will rooted in the self, in that part of him which is timeless, sovereign, and whole. This will does not scream. It does not seduce. It waits. Through retention, the noise begins to fall away. As the body grows stronger and more grounded, the mind becomes stiller. The fog that once obscured vision begins to lift. The countless wants imposed by society, status, approval, instant pleasure, lose their grip. What remains is something quieter, but far more enduring, a sense of direction that arises not from the outside, but from within. It is important to understand that this clarity does not emerge instantly. It must be earned. It must be earned. The first stage of retention often brings confusion as old patterns begin to crumble. Without the numbing rhythm of release, the man is left face to face with his unfulfilled potential and his disordered inner world. For many, this is a confrontation with the shadow, the parts of the psyche that have long gone ignored. The path forward seems unclear because, for the first time, he is looking with his own eyes, not borrowed ones, But in the very act of staying, of remaining present within the tension, something ancient awakens. Direction. Will is not mere desire. Will is focused energy. It is the ability to choose one thing above all others and to devote oneself fully to it. But energy must first be conserved before it can be directed. This is the metaphysical truth behind semen retention. It is not just the saving of fluid, it is the saving of intent. Every act of release without meaning fragments that intent, scattering it into the void. But every act of restraint gathers the will, condensing it, sharpening it like a blade. As the days and weeks pass, the retained energy begins to organize the inner world. The man finds himself more decisive, not because he is reacting, but because he is responding from a place of inner truth. He no longer drifts between fleeting passions. He begins to recognize what truly calls to him. Work that once felt dull now appears as a sacred task. Relationships become mirrors of his inner alignment. He does not chase, but attracts, drawn by something larger than ambition. Purpose. This purpose is not always grand in appearance. It may not resemble the myths of conquest or fame, but it possesses a quality of inevitability. It fits the man like a well-worn coat, tailored by the soul itself. It is a path that can only be walked by him, and only once. The deeper he walks it, the less he needs to explain himself. His life begins to speak on his behalf. Without clarity of will, man is a wanderer. With it, he becomes a vessel of intention, an arrow in flight. Retention sharpens that arrow. It quiets the noise and reveals the signal. It silences the multitude of false voices so that the true voice, the one beneath all others, can emerge from the silence and point the way forward. The journey of semen retention, if pursued beyond mere surface-level discipline, inevitably becomes a confrontation with the inner world. A descent into the forgotten chambers of the psyche where the fragmented masculine archetypes wait to be remembered, reclaimed, and integrated. These are not roles to be performed. They are ancient energies, living potentials embedded in the collective unconscious of every man. They are the warrior, the king, the magician, the lover, primal expressions of masculine essence that, when left unconscious, either dominate us from the shadows or atrophy into weakness. Most men today are not initiated into manhood. They are biologically adult, yet psychologically unformed. They wear masks, imitations of strength, charm, or confidence. But beneath these lies a fractured identity, unconsciously shaped by cultural conditioning, father wounds, and the unprocessed shame of misused or misunderstood power. Retention becomes more than a physical practice in this context. It becomes a rite of initiation. By withholding the seed, the man begins to contain his energy, and in doing so, he is forced to meet himself, not the persona, but the raw, undigested contents of his soul. The first archetype that often emerges is the warrior. This is the part of the man that longs for challenge, discipline, and direction. Not mindless aggression, but focused strength. When sexual energy is retained, it seeks an outlet, and the warrior steps forward to harness it. Minus it. He thrives in adversity, in commitment, in purposeful struggle. The man begins to feel a surge of inner command, a desire to protect boundaries, physical, emotional, spiritual. He may become more assertive, not from arrogance, but from alignment. The passive man begins to disappear. The man who tolerated too much now speaks, acts, and defends what matters. Soon after, the lover makes his presence known. Not the impulsive addict who seeks pleasure at every turn, but the true lover who feels deeply and sees the beauty in all things. Withholding release does not kill desire, it refines it. The man begins to experience intimacy in more subtle forms. The touch of wind, the sound of music, the eyes of another. Erotic energy becomes less compulsive, more reverent. The lover teaches him not to consume, but to cherish, to hold without needing to possess. It is here that many men realize how numb they once were, how disconnected from sensation, emotion, and connection. Retention rekindles the fire not only of sex, but of life itself. As the inner world stabilizes, the magician arises. He is the alchemist, the seer, the architect of unseen forces. The magician works through intuition, imagination, and wisdom. He takes the raw energy of the warrior and the passion of the lover and transforms them into vision. Retention fuels this archetype with clarity. Insights surface, patterns become visible. The man becomes more aware of cycles, dreams, symbols. He becomes a student of the hidden laws governing his life. In this state, he no longer reacts to life, but participates in its unfolding with conscious awareness. At the center of them all is the king, not a tyrant, not a narcissist, but the embodiment of divine order and stability. The king integrates the other archetypes, ruling not with domination, but with presence. When the king is seated on the inner throne, the man exudes calm, depth, and purpose. He creates structure, holds space, blesses others, and brings harmony. He does not seek validation because he carries within him the weight of self-knowledge. Retention, as it stores and refines the primal life force, creates the internal gravity that draws this archetype forth. The king cannot be summoned by force. He appears only when the man is prepared to rule himself. This integration is not linear. These archetypes rise and fall like tides, appearing in dreams, in moods, in moments of crisis or silence. But as retention continues, the man no longer identifies with one aspect alone. He becomes whole, not perfect, but united. Each part of him speaks in its season. There is no more need for pretense, no need to exaggerate masculinity or hide vulnerability. His strength is no longer brittle performance. It is rooted in the soul. Presence is not taught. It is not memorized, mimicked, or spoken into existence. It is felt immediately, unconsciously, and undeniably. It is the silent language of energy, the weight of being that enters a room before words are spoken. Most men have lost it, unaware they ever had it. In its absence, they chase approval, overcompensate with performance, or retreat into passivity. But presence is not something added to the self. It is what remains when all falsehoods fall away. And in the practice of semen retention, a man begins to rediscover this lost center, not through effort, but through accumulation. The retained sexual essence is not idle. It does not simply sit within the body like still water. It moves, it grows, it radiates. As the days of retention deepen, that energy, formerly expelled through unconscious release, begins to condense, gather, and rise. It nourishes the nervous system, stabilizes the breath, grounds the voice, sharpens the eyes. It gives the man a density of being, a gravitational pull. He does not need to try to be confident. He simply is. There is nothing to prove. The body speaks before the mouth opens. What others begin to notice is something they cannot articulate. People feel him more than they understand him. His silence becomes more telling than another's speech. His gaze holds steady. His movements are deliberate. There is no urgency in him, no subtle pleading for attention or validation. This absence of need creates space, and into that space, others are drawn. This is the nature of true magnetism. It is not the pursuit of attraction, but the consequence of wholeness. Women, in particular, are sensitive to this energy, not because of surface-level behaviors or postures, but because at the instinctual level, they feel the man's coherence. A man who retains is not fractured. He is not bleeding his essence into screens, into fantasy, into lustful craving. His energy is sovereign. It is not scattered or diluted, but focused and contained. This containment is felt in his eyes, in his tone, in the subtle force of his presence. It is not domination, it is polarity. He has become a vessel of unspoken tension, and tension is the root of attraction. But presence is not merely about allure. It is also the foundation of leadership, of influence, of spiritual authority. The man who has learned to hold his energy can also hold space, for others, for conflict, for silence. He does not flee from discomfort. He does not grasp for certainty. He stands firm, not with arrogance, but with rootedness. This stability becomes rare in a world of constant movement and superficial connection. Others instinctively turn toward him, not because he demands attention, but because he emits coherence. He has become a fixed point in a turning world. This kind of magnetism cannot be faked, nor can it be maintained without inner discipline. Without retention, without the conscious refusal to scatter one's life force, the man returns to the shallow self, reacting to the environment, bound to impulse, enslaved by fleeting desire. But through retention, he stores his energy like a reservoir beneath the surface. And when he speaks, it carries weight. When he listens, others feel heard. When he acts, his movements ripple beyond the moment. This is not charisma in the conventional sense. It is resonance. It is resonance. The man has become attuned to something deeper than social signals. He is aligned with essence. There is also a physiological dimension to this presence. The retained energy nourishes the blood, calms the nervous system, strengthens the heart. The eyes become brighter, the skin more radiant, the posture more upright, not out of vanity, but because the body begins to reflect the inner order. It binds together the fragmented aspects of the psyche, reconnecting what was once lost. The man becomes whole, not divided between what he desires and who he is, but integrated. His body becomes a temple, his mind a mirror, his spirit a flame that no longer flickers in the wind.